Good afternoon, parents. Welcome to another Region 5 Mathematics Parents Workshop. Today, we're going to be looking at riding the shift, Rote learning to conceptual mastery. Your presenters for this afternoon's session are yours truly, Itania Simpson, and Michelle Towson Cummings. We're going to just give others a few more minutes to join, and then we will begin shortly. Just giving persons another couple of minutes to join in. We're going to begin in another just two more minutes. Okay. All right, warm welcome again to all those who have missed the first welcome. And we're going to be starting our presentation in another minute, one more minute. All right. Okay, parents, again, a pleasant afternoon to you all. Welcome again to all those who are just coming onto our platform, or YouTube and our Zoom platform. I want to welcome you all. And so at this time, we're going to invite the presence of the Lord here as we go through our workshop. Let us pray. Most righteous and eternal God, here we are in your presence once more. We give you thanks, Lord, for today, and we give you thanks for another opportunity where we are able to come into your presence and we can share some of the concepts, some of the knowledge, some of the activities with our parents. God, you see, our desire is that our children will perform, and we would love for our children to continue to enjoy and to continue to grow in learning the different aspects of mathematics. We pray, mighty God, that whatever is said here may be said with understanding and clarity. May our parents leave here with new and fresh ideas. And Lord, may our children, or the children that we seek to help and serve, may they too benefit from today's activity. We pray, God, that the internet, whatever platforms we are using, we pray, God, that for sustainability. We pray, God, for the sustainability of electricity. And we claim everything in your precious name as we look to you and tell you thanks. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. At this time, I'll invite Mrs. Cummings to just give you a few words of greeting.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Simpson, and good afternoon, parents. It has been a while. How are you? I really hope that your day went well. And as we unwind this afternoon and just have a little talk, I hope that you will be enlightened and that you will leave this session knowing that there is one new thing that you can do with your children as we look at just shifting from just rote learning and to help our children to gain conceptual mastery. Parents, I ask that you just participate in the discussions when you're asked to use up your raise hand feature. Type in the chat when you need to. When we want you to share just by giving your opinion, don't be afraid. I think you would have known by now that when it comes to the family in Region 5, we are always here to listen to each other and to learn from each other. So let us just spend the next few minutes of the hour that we hope to engage you, just really soaking in what we have prepared for you this afternoon. Parents, let us just participate and make this a fulfilling session. You will hear more from me a little later in the presentation, but I now hand back over to Mrs. Simpson.
Okay, parents, here we are again. Now, as was stated earlier on, our topic for our workshop this afternoon, riding the shift, rote learning to conceptual mastery. But before we actually get down into our whole presentation for this afternoon, let us just get to just relax, unwind, lift our feet up a little, yes, and let's just get to know one another through this activity that we will be presenting. Now, the questions I'm asking, all I'm asking of you is to, as Mrs. Cummings would have said, just type in the chat to give your responses. Which of the following are you? We're looking at option A or option B. Type in the chat and let's hear what's happening. Remember, it's the getting to know you session. Anything in the chat yet, Mrs. Cummings?
Okay, so far I have option B, waiting to see option B. All right, so our ladies seem to be dominating our platform this afternoon. Mrs. Simpson, I'm seeing all option Bs. Where are our fathers? All
and
right,
here
well,
I was getting ready to congratulate our fathers who would have joined our sessions this afternoon. All right, so I guess further down we can wait. So we're seeing most of our responses being option B. All right, let's continue to get to know each other. Which of the following best represents your family? We have the parents and a child family, which is option A. Option B, mother and father, boy and girl, ideal family. Most persons dream of this one. Or option C, where we have children, mommy and daddy, and animals. And parents. If you don't see your option there, you can always choose D, which would suggest that your option isn't there. We're asking those. Kindly remember to mute your mics when you're not speaking directly to us.
Okay, and
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Simpson, you have asked for option D, and I'm seeing some option Ds, but I'm also seeing quite a few option Cs and a few Bs in the mix.
Good, good. All right, parents. So we're getting to know our parents and the type of parents we have working with. Parents with 2 children, parents with more than 1 children, and that sort of thing. Let's continue. All right. Now, we have to have our own downtime. Which of the following represents you when you are in your downtime? Option A, option B, or option C? And as usual, and we're not saying that option D don't count, we're just saying that maybe the options that we have, you have something different from those. So if it's not there, then feel free to write option D.
Okay, so I'm getting some Ds as well. We're getting some Ds, but I see option B, option C. Seem like we don't have a lot of television watchers.
We don't have any. Tell me, we don't have option A persons. I was hoping to have a few company, Mrs. Cummings.
Well, maybe I spoke a little too soon. There is an A, and of course, there are persons who are expounding and adding an option that we don't have, which is browsing the net.
That's good, right? So a lot of persons tend to do that in their downtime. All right. So we're getting a little bit more comfortable with each other. So here's my next question. Which of the following represents how you feel about math? Let's see. Anything in the chat?
And rightly so. I was seeing option B's and then an A just jumped into the mix. And then I'm seeing B and C as well. All right.
Oh, I was really hoping that all of my answers or options would be only option B. But I guess after today's session, Mrs. Cummings, our parents will now change their perspective. And I really do trust and hope that they will also pass on the option B feeling to their children. Now, parents, it's good getting to know you. And I see that we have some mixture persons who would like to have their downtime reading a book or just browsing the net, getting excited about math. Now, those persons for option C and A, we're not going to leave you out. And we trust that today's session will help somewhat to change your mind. Now, for today's session, we're going to be looking at identifying some common mathematical rote learning practices. It also seeks to explain the difference between rote learning and conceptual learning. Also, we're going to be exploring strategies that parents can use to make the shift from rote learning to conceptual learning. Let's see how this can be done. But first, let's take a trip down memory lane. Have you ever done these with your child or children? And so we take a walk. Have you ever sang songs like these? Who remembers?
One little finger, one little finger, one little finger, tap, tap, tap.
I'm sure I can just hear parents singing along. Anything in the chat, Mrs. Cummings? Or no one remembers?
Okay, of course. I've seen more yeses though. I'm even getting the laughing. And yes,
Good
indicating
job.
that they remember. Yes.
Remember. All right, so let's continue memory lane. Have you ever said to your child, count with me? And we're counting 1, 2, 3. And there may be other songs that you would have used to assist with the counting and other things that you may have done to assist with the counting. Boy, I see the chat lighting up, Mrs. Cummings. What's happening in there?
Of course, our parents are saying yes. These are things that they have been doing with their children. Yes is dominant.
Okay, good. All right, let's continue. What about telling your child to say the timetable for you? Most times it's 2 times or 3, even 5. And the easiest of them all would be the 10 times table.
And
Good.
definitely, Mrs. Simpson, the parents are identifying with these activities as those that they have done with their children.
Great. Now that we have looked at these activities, what about this last one? And for us, it would not necessarily be the supermarket. Sometimes it's a very shop we're going to. But have you ever said to your child, we're going to the shop or the supermarket? I need you to memorize the items on the list for me. For example, 3 tins of sausages, 2 packs of Lasco, a tin of milk, etc. Any of those things ring a bell?
Well, Mrs. Simpson, I think we have hit the nail on the head. Our parents are really saying yes, they are doing these things. And of course, they're adding, of course, memory Bible verses, and they too have other activities that they do.
Very good. I am pleased. All right, parents, now that we have looked at all of these activities, let's continue our journey into our presentation. Let's do a bit of reflecting. And so I'm asking the question this evening, were any of those activities useful in helping your child or children learn math? If so, how? And at this point, I don't want you to just type in the chat. I'd love someone to just open their mics quickly and just share briefly if these activities were helpful and how. Remember now, we got to know each other, so nobody should feel shy.
Okay. So if you wish to share, you may just raise your hand, use the raise hand feature so you can be identified.
No one brave enough, Mrs. Cummings?
We're not seeing any brave person to share, but I know that persons are really saying that they have done these activities. They're typing in the chat though. So I think that is where I'll have to turn for the responses. And I am here in the chat. Yes, sharpen their ability to add quickly without drawing sticks. Yes, it helps them to remember things and know their numbers, etc.
Okay, good.
All right.
Good.
And I see raised hand. I think that is Tenise, that's the name. And I'm seeing it teach us how to memorize and sharpen the minds. I think they expand the memory span. So our parents are opting to type in the chat for us this afternoon, but I did see a parent labeled as Tanis, the hand being raised there. Is it that Tanis would want to share with us?
Yes,
All right.
Good evening, you're hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Okay, we're hearing you now. Go ahead.
With my son at home, I taught him to count if I'm making drinks, and he said, "Mommy, can I make the drinks?" I said, "Sure." I said, "You're going to take the sugar out the jar, and you count each spoon you put into the cup for the drink, and he will count each spoon." And he said, "Mommy, will 5 spoons do?" And he counts, and that's how I taught him to learn to count.
Okay. Okay, good. So we're saying then that at some point in time, our children would have learned, or they would have remembered some of the activities. They would have remembered the numbers in counting. They would have remembered moving from one number to the next. However, let me ask another question. Would you describe these activities as promoting rote or conceptual learning? What are your thoughts? Rote or conceptual learning? What are your thoughts?
Okay. So I see in the chat, they help in developing memory skills, but not conceptual skills. Okay, so that's one person. So, and she has added rote learning. All right, let's see if anybody else will type a response in the chat.
Or if they want to share briefly by talking, no problem.
Okay, nothing else in the chat as yet, Mrs. Simpson.
All right. So parents, let's take it a step further. Let us now look at what is rote learning versus conceptual learning. I'm going to be sharing with you some statements, and you're going to decide if they are rote or conceptual. So the first one I have on screen is memorization of information based on repetition. Would you say this is rote or conceptual? Type your responses in the chat.
Okay, nothing. Okay, before I said nothing, rote is popping up in the chat, Mrs. Simpson. Rote is the domineering the chat right now.
I'm wondering if these parents got a peek into our presentation, Mrs. Cummings, because it seems as if we don't need to continue. Yes, parents, you are indeed correct. It is actually rote. Let's see, what will your response be to this one? Flexibly applying knowledge to diverse or different situations. Would we say that's rote or conceptual?
Okay, and conceptual is right there as the first response on that question. Conceptual is coming through.
Conceptual, that's all they're saying?
Yes, Mrs.
All right,
Simpson, conceptual.
Very good. So you're indeed correct once more, parents, and you're on the ball. Let's see if you can do this third time in a row. Learners analyzing information, making connections, and evaluating the relevance of different concepts to a given situation. Would this be conceptual or rote?
And I can tell you once again, our parents are out, and conceptual is definitely coming through as the response of choice.
Okay, let's see if they're correct. Good, 3 in a row. So our parents are indeed on the ball. And our final statement provides the minimum information. What would this one be?
And once more, wrote is the dominant response in the chat, Mrs. Simpson.
So let's see if they're correct. Good job. Good job, parents. You're on the ball. Now, we said that we're looking at rote versus conceptual learning. Let's look at these scenarios or statements that we have here. And let's look at the statements that relate to rote, as well as the statements that relate to conceptual learning. What do you notice about the statements relating to rote? What vocabulary, what words keep popping out at you as it relates to rote? And the same thing with conceptual learning. What are the different words that pops out that allows you to know that conceptual learning is indeed different from rote learning, and that conceptual learning has taken place? You know, parents, whichever one you feel comfortable in, if you're sharing in the chat or you want to talk, feel free.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat as yet. I hope I didn't speak a little too early. But nothing as yet, so maybe our parents need a little help with this one.
All right.
Okay, and as I said, I may have spoken a little too early. We know in this environment, sometimes things come through at different times. So conceptual requires higher order thinking skills. Memorize, rote. Conceptual, in-depth knowledge / information. So that's coming through from 2 of our so eloquent parents. And I also get rote is always remembering.
Ah, okay, good job. So yes, parents, you're on the ball. And to just summarize what you've said, rote learning, effective for memorizing basic facts, formulas, or vocabulary. Whereas with conceptual learning, this promotes conceptual understanding, it promotes critical thinking, and it also promotes the ability to apply what was taught to any problem-solving situation. So indeed, you're on the ball. Now, let's take it a little bit further. Let's reflect based on the activities that we shared earlier on. Remember those activities, the ones where we were asking if you've ever sang a song or say the timetable. Let's see if those activities would be actually promoting rote or conceptual learning. Let's see. Repeating a song, same thing. Repeating the timetable, same activities. Going to the supermarket, counting from 1 to 10. Would it be rote, or is it promoting conceptual learning or promoting rote? Which one?
And sure enough, coming through in the chat is rote. Rote is the response in the chat.
And indeed, our parents are definitely on the ball. All right, let's continue. So the question now we're asking is, how can we use these activities to promote conceptual learning? And so at this time, Mrs. Cummings will now take you through making the shift from rote learning to conceptual learning.
Okay, so parents, as you would have rightly said in the beginning, when you reflected on the things that you would have been doing with your children, and these are early things that we introduce to our children, the counting, knowing their numbers. We have to be mindful, and this is what we want to steer you to this afternoon, that as we introduce these ideas into our children, they also lend themselves to conceptual understanding of concepts which are critical to these counting skills and principles. Right? So we have like ordering numbers. We have number sequencing, patterning, ordinal numbers. And of course, when we talk about our numerals and associating it with quantities, or even when children speak of numbers, associating them with quantity. So let's continue. So we're going to be looking at how we can make this shift from rote to conceptual through everyday tasks. And this afternoon, our everyday task is hanging clothes on the line. So one of the things we do know is that if your children are anything like the daughter I had, our clothespins become their favorite toys. And they have them all over the place. So let us see how we can use these activities. So when we're looking at hanging clothes, one of the things we can ask, how many clothespins would we use or did we use for 3 shirts? So let us look at the picture that we have there, and we're going to look at counting. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So we engage our children in now focusing on associating that quantity with 6 or even 4 or even 5. And they're looking at just 3 shirts. They could have started anywhere. So here we have 6 clothespins. Now, allowing our children to count while we're putting the clothes on the line, this is allowing our children to develop that association between a number and a quantity. We may even extend it a little further. Sometimes we'll say to our children, could you give me 2 clothespins? Could you get me 5 clothespins? And we're talking about the conversations, the little tasks. And I liked when Tanis would have shared earlier about the spoons of sugar. And that is associating a quantity with that number, right? And these are simple activities that help to develop conceptual learning and understanding. So we continue with hanging clothes on the line. So have we thought about skip counting? We have the physical representation, which is concrete. And we know about teaching, helping our children with concrete understanding. So in skip counting, the same clothespin, so we're counting by 2s. So here we go, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and we could continue. So here our children are developing that sequence, their ability to develop sequences, right? And that is something that is critical in mathematics. And that's just one other key element of understanding counting's principles and numbers that children need to really know. All right, so let us look at another activity with our same clothes on the line. Have we ever considered that we can develop patterns from our clothespins? So parents, I'm challenging you now that you need to gonna step away from just the board clothespins, and we're gonna have to put some color in the mix. So let's look at a possible pattern that can be generated. All right, so let's go. So here we have our 1 blue clothespin. All right, then we're gonna be adding another. So now we have 2 blue clothespins, followed by a 3rd clothespin, but then the color has now changed to a red. So here we have 3 green clothespins popping up. And this is followed by a red. I hope you're looking at what you think will be coming next. All right, but let's see 2 blue clothespins, and which clothespin is coming next? Okay, and we have a red clothespin. So what would come next, parents? And I see there it is, we have green. So when we're developing patterns, when we have these different variation in color of pins, we can ask our children which color would come next. And parents, I want to type in the chat. All right, type in the chat. And I see some other comments from the previous highlight coming through, Mrs. Simpson. Let's see if our parents know which color is coming next and how many of that color, because these are questions we want them to start asking their children at home.
Well, I see Shireen had said earlier on that we can do skip counting too using odd numbers. So
Great.
right. So they could have started, otherwise they could have started from one end of the clothespin to the next. Very good. I'm not seeing any response to our new question. Yes, Tanis is saying 2 blue is next. Shanoy is saying red. 1 red is next, says Alisa.
Okay. And sure enough, parents. So you see, even when the pattern itself is not a total linear pattern, and we were deliberate in not putting a linear pattern because we just wanted to show you that there are other patterns that can be developed. All right, parents? So this is just another idea. You're helping your children to develop that skill of analysis. And we're looking at just one more task here with hanging clothes on the line. Did you know you could do so many tasks, so many things, so many conceptual things could come from just hanging clothes on the line? So let us look at which color was first in the pattern. All right, which color was first in the pattern? So here again, parents, right away, we know that we are asking our children again to do some more analysis, but applying another principle. All right. And there we have the blue clothespin. So let's see if you can get the next one coming up, the next question now. Which is the second color in the pattern? And these are questions, even though I'm posing them to you like this, these are questions that we would ask our children. And in the chat, I see the chat is lighting up, Mrs. Simpson.
I am seeing red. Red is coming. Red is a dominant answer so far.
Okay, great job, parents. And sure enough, once again, another concept in mathematics is coming out. And this is looking at our ordinal numbers. And I like our parents, how they're participating this afternoon, Mrs. Simpson.
Yes.
I see that we will be having some future brilliance in math and just really deep thinkers of mathematics coming up in our children. And that is very encouraging. So good job, parents. So as we said, there are activities, there are little tasks that we do at home, but there are also these everyday items that we have at home. Because I think as Jamaicans, some of these things are things we always have. We know we always have cards, we always have dominoes, we always have dice, marbles. And for those parents who say, boy, the children lose all the marbles, we are never out of stones in Jamaica. We're never out of gravel. We're never out of coins that we have in the piggy bank, right?
That's true.
And all of these are these items that we can use to support the development of these approaches that we're sharing with you. So let us look at another approach or another game. So our popular card game. So we have the deck of cards. And what are some of the popular card games that we normally play? So I knew I grew up playing Go Fish and 3-card, Crazy 8. Of course, Crazy 8, we align it to Uno. But before we knew about the American Uno, we had our Crazy 8, Spoon, and Old Maids. And these are just some games that we would share with our children. And we play and allow them to play. But I'm going to be taking a little further to another card game that we would love for you to try with your children. And this is a game of add and double. Add and double. So I see that my parents are participating in the chat. So I know that the fingers are going to be lining up, Mrs. Simpson, with the responses. But let me just share how this game is played. So for this game, we're basically having our cards lay out. Depending on the level of your child at home, you can decide which cards you may want to remove. Because we know when we go to our king and queen, then we go up into 11, 12, 13. But the idea is 2 cards will be selected. So the deck will be split, 2 cards will be selected. And once those 2 cards are placed face up, then the competition begins in who can first quickly add the values on the card and then double it. So let's see how sharp we are. And therefore, we're going to be sharing. So we have 3 rounds. So let's see, Mrs. Simpson, if the same person is going to be dominating the 3 rounds this afternoon. So let's see what our first two cards are. Okay, so our first two cards are 3 of spades and 5 of hearts. So remember now, add and double. So let's see what is coming out in the chat.
Nothing in the chat yet. Yes, I see one answer. I see
All right,
16.
so I see.
Trisha Platt is at 16. And
So we know
Alicia
that.
is at 16. Good job. You're
All
on the
right,
ball.
and we know that Miss Platt is leading this afternoon with our 5 points. So let's see what she does. Let's see. All right. So let's see the reveal so we can go to round 2.
Yes,
Great.
indeed. 16
So-
is correct.
Great. So round 2 now. Let's see the reveal for round 2. So round 2, we have 10 of spades and ace of heart. Okay. And I see, Mrs. Simpson, that somebody was there lining up because
Yes.
I see a response in the chat that says Miss Platt not going to take this home this evening.
Okay, I'm seeing 22. I'm seeing 36.
All right. And let's see who is correct. Remember, the ace of heart values 1. When we talk about ace in the packet, values 1.
Yes, I'm seeing 22, 28, 22 again. So let's see what the reveal is. It looks as if Miss Platt is out of the game. I'm not seeing her any at all.
Come on, Miss Platt, don't tell me that you gave up. I know you didn't give up. I'm going to take it that something went wrong with the device or the internet that time around. So let's see the reveal for round 2.
And the answer indeed is 22.
Okay. All right, parents. So we have one more round to go, you know. So now Miss Platt would have started the first round, and then we had Miss Shireen in the second coming up first. So let's see who will ace this one. Who will be first in this one?
Oh, dear.
Okay.
Shireen. Shireen is
All
on the
right.
ball this time.
Okay. All right. All right.
So
Very good.
I'm seeing all others, Grayson, Delicia, a lot of persons, and all of them saying 16. So let's see.
Okay.
And Griffiths Bernard is saying 16 is correct. So let's see. Yes, 16 is indeed correct.
All right. Great job, parents. And this is just an introduction. And I see how you are going through it. And with that enthusiasm, I think as parents, if when we share these games with our children, we have a similar enthusiasm in playing them, over time, they too will enjoy playing these games. All right, so this is just an idea we want to share with you. And let us go on to see what else. So quite naturally, we have other games that we play in the home, because as long as we're Jamaicans, these things are rooted in us. And all of these games displayed here, our snake and ladder, our Monopoly, our Ludo game, we use the die to engage the playing and just the players. So let us look at another popular game in Jamaica. As we said, there's no child in Jamaica who doesn't grow up knowing dominoes, right? But let us look at another way that we can use the dominoes at home to help our children with math. All right, so for this game, we're simply looking at, similar to the card where we're flipping the dominoes, and this time we're looking at asking our children to form the largest possible number or the smallest possible number from the digits. Okay, and of course you can add variations where you can add. In this one, we're going to be flipping 2 dominoes. So player 1 will show a domino, player 2 will show a domino, and therefore we'll end up with a 4-digit number. But we could go with 4 dominoes, etc., depending on the level and the age of your child or the grade of your child. So let's go, Mrs. Simpson, with the first 2 reveal. Great. So there we have our 2 dominoes on screen. So the digits now are based on the sections of the domino. So the top section would be 1 digit, the bottom section will be 2 with the second digit, and so on. So let us see what these digits would be. So we're just showing you for this first one. So the digits are 3, 3, 5, 2. So there you go, parents. Those are the digits for our activity. And I want you to make for me the largest number, the largest possible number. Put your responses in the chat. Okay. And I see Mrs. Simpson, Miss Shireen is holding first place in this game once more. All right, so I see that Miss Shireen has come out this evening to give some competition.
Yes, and indeed, her answer is correct. 5,332. And Trisha Platt as well, and Lisa as well. They too have the same answer.
And I noticed probably some parents are giving up. Don't give up, parents. I want to see some other names popping up as well in the chat. But very good. So let's go to the second round, Mrs. Simpson. And again, these are only 3 rounds, so we're down to second round. So I challenged Miss Platt in the first one, and she fell out. I don't know what happened to Miss Platt. So let's see if Miss Shereen will keep up in the second round. All right, so now we're at round 2. So I'm not going to tell you what the digits are. Based on round 1, you know how to take the digits down. So let's hear this time the smallest number, utilizing all digits. Remember, the top of the domino, that's 1 digit, the second. So we're looking at having a 4-digit number. A 4-digit number. And let me go again. It's the smallest possible number this time around.
So I'm seeing the digits are
number.
3. The digits are, wait, let's go back to the top. I'm seeing 6300 as the digits. So that's indeed correct. And the smallest number, I'm seeing 3006 as the smallest number being formed.
All right. So I know I saw some popping up, Mrs. Simpson, with those zeros in front. But remember, we're looking at a 4-digit number. So we have to be careful, that if we put those digits in front, you're not ending up with a 4-digit number, but you're ending up with a 2-digit number. So you have to be careful, right? So we have to be careful with that. We're required to write a 4-digit number. And these are some of the things that your children will do. And that's one of the reasons why the 0 was included, why the blank was included in this one, because we know these are some of the things that our children will do at home. All right. So let's go to our final round. Okay, now for this round, all right, and I'm telling you, they know exactly, they didn't even wait for me to ask for the largest possible number, Mrs. Simpson.
Denise is on the ball, and Miss Roshane Rodney.
I'm telling you, they didn't even bother to wait. And parents, to this, one of the things I want to say that you could add, once they have written the number, for example, here, the largest possible number, you could add a little more question to it to say, okay, which number would be 10 less than the largest possible number? Which number would be 5 more than the largest possible number? Challenge them. These are some of the things that they will be learning at school. Can we round to the nearest 1,000 or round to the nearest 100? And we're going into a section of the presentation that we're going to be looking at having conversations, because some of the conceptual learning that we'd want our children to have is going to come through how we engage them when we speak with them. And thank you so much, Mrs. Bernard. Place value as well. And at this point, I'm going to just hand it back over to Mrs. Simpson. Thank you so much, parents. Thank you for your participation.
Good. There are a few more in the chat before I can't. Oh, And the smallest number, Roshane says it's 1,456. So that is indeed correct. All right, parents. So Mrs. Cummings took us through some wonderful games that we can use and all the things that we have in our household. The good thing about it, some of it we can actually make, and some of it too, we would have to purchase. But the good thing is that these things are popular and we can find them anywhere throughout. Now, as we continue, we're going to now look at conversation and questioning to assist us in making the shift from rote learning to conceptual learning. Now, we all know the popular times table. So here we have Mommy.
All right, so let's go again, Mrs. Simpson. I think we lost your sharing just now.
Oh dear. Just a second.
And parents, we know this happen in this technological environment.
Are we back?
Yes, Mrs. Simpson, you are, yes.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, parents, so let's go. So we're seeing Mommy doing a little bit of house chore and her son comes home. Good evening, Mommy. Hey, Josh, what's up? How was school today? It was good. We learned our 2 and 3 times table. Oh, that sounds great. So you know you're going to have to say it for me now. No problem, Mommy. No problem, Mommy. Let me start at my 2 times.
2, 1 is 2, 2, 2 is 4, 2, 3 is 6, 2, 4 is 8, 2, 5 is 10, 2, 6 is 12, 2, 7 is 14, 2, 8 is 16, 2, 9 is 18, 2, 10 is 20, 2, 11 is 22, and 2, 12 is 24.
Wow. I'm sure some of us, the parents, were saying it along with Josh. You know, great job, Josh. So, what is 2 times 4 then? 2 ones, 2, 2 twos, 4, 2, 3, 6, 2, 4 is 8. Mommy, 2 times 4 is 8. Parents, take a stop. Can you tell me what's happening in this picture? What do you notice happened with this conversation between Mommy and Josh? Feel free to share. Anybody sharing?
I think.
Okay, go ahead.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
I think
we're not hearing you quite clearly.
Timetable, like because of the way that he was taught, so he just know it as a song, but he doesn't actually. Are you hearing me better now?
You'd have to repeat.
Can you hear me better?
Up. Yes, much clearer. Go ahead.
I was saying, so Josh doesn't really know his timetable, like know the numbers. He has to go over the timetable again to really know what 2 times 4 is. I guess it's because of the way he was taught during the song, so he was just singing the song, but he doesn't actually know where the numbers stand.
And he actually doesn't know
So
what they represent. Very good. So it was all
yes, so
done
because
through. Go ahead.
so because his mother did not ask um in the form of saying them one by one, like 2 times 2 and then move on to 2 times 4. So he doesn't really know if she, since she asked him just randomly, then he doesn't know how to answer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
All
for
right,
You're
sharing
thank
welcome.
that.
you. I think I saw Delicia hand up earlier. Delicia, you lowered your
Yes.
hand, but then we have a few comments in the chat. Josh and his mommy is having a clear communication as to what happened in school today, and also she's trying to find out what Josh has learned in school. Mrs. Bernard would have also commented rote learning is what was also observed. Tanis is adding he can remember it by singing it, but can't by saying it individually.
And indeed, parents, you're correct. You're correct. That is indeed what would have happened. What's happening? What's happening? Oh my gosh. All right, let's move on. Now, the question is, parents, how can you help your child or children to have a more conceptual understanding of the timetables? Let's look at a way. Or do you care to suggest something before we go any further if you have any ideas? No one would like to share?
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
It's Tricia Flat. So instead of letting them sing in it, allow them to identify it. So for example, you could let them call the timetable first, and then probably you'll say 2 times 4 instead of letting them saying it like that. So they will be able to identify it and identify them.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your suggestion, Trisha. Anyone else? All right. So anything in the chat, Mrs. Cummings?
And yes, in the chat, Alyssa is saying, let them relate the timetable to groups and members.
Very good. Mrs. Cummings, I am really convinced that our parents got a peek into our presentation.
I
Because
think it's
they are
just an
on the ball.
indication that they have been doing a good job at home.
At home. I agree. All right. So just to continue and to just ditto what you parents would have said, you may want to consider, as someone had said, asking your child to use division instead of multiplication. For example, asking your child to tell you how many groups of 4 he or she can get from 12. Let's look at how this can be done. If 3 multiplied by 4 equals 12, what would be 12 divided by 4? So we can clearly see the answer is 3. Or we could say, what would be 12 divided by 3? The answer again is 4. Now here too is a chance for parents to realize or to ask your child or your children the question, what do you notice? Now, children would have been exposed to factors, so clear they would see then that 3 times 4, which would have been the factors of 12. When you multiply those, then the product will give you 12. Now, the reverse would work, where either of those factors are used to divide 12, or what would be? The result would be the other factor. So as in the case of the factor 4 being used, the result would be the other factor, which would have been 3. As in the case where 3 is used, the answer would be the other factor, which would be 4. Let's move on to something else. You may want to consider getting your child to make representation of what the expression means. So again, 3 times 4 equals 12. What does it really mean? It's actually saying 3 times 4 means 3 groups of 4. So you're actually allowing the students to see what 3 groups of 4. And the representation would be 1 group of 4, 2 groups of 4, 3 groups of 4. This is also another way to teach, to show multiplication where you have 4 times 3. What does this mean? It actually means 4 groups of 3. How can we represent this? 1 group of 3, 2 groups of 3, 3 groups of 3, and 4 groups of 3. Parents, other things that you can do to continue to reinforce, you could have asked your children to, what other ways could you represent 12? Or what could you do? What other things can be done to give you the total 12? And you would have different responses. You'd hear things like, for example, addition, adding 8 and 4, different representations can give you 12. 6 times 2, other factors, 12 times 1. And then to reinforce, you would have had to ask them to represent these, show their understanding of what it means 12 times 1, or 6 times 2, or 2 times 3. So let's continue, parents, in looking at making the shift from rote learning through to conceptual learning. Conceptual learning, and here now we're going to be looking at analysis. And so we have taken it to something fun. We're looking at birth dates in the family. Now, this pretty young lady is saying or introducing her family to you. And she's saying that we are the Simpsons. And she's showing her daddy. She's showing her mommy and her 2 brothers. So she's giving us a bit of information. She's giving us daddy's birthday, which is the 4th of May. Mommy's birthday, which is the 7th of November. And both brothers will celebrate, the one on the 12th of February and the other the 18th of June. And her very own birthday is the 17th of March. Now, how can we use the calendar, or how can we use birth dates to allow students to think, allow your children to think conceptually? We could do this by asking them questions. We can ask them, for example, how many days are between your 2 brothers' birth dates? And so would have them calculate, would have them even using the skills that they would have learned. They can even count using the calendar itself, you counting the dates between the birth dates. They can use other things that they would have learned in terms of the number of days in a week, the number of weeks in a month. All of those things can come into play. Another question can be asked: whose birth date is closest to Christmas? They can use the calendar to assist, or again, it will call for some thinking, where they'll have to look to see where each person's birthday would fall. And they would have to decide then, all right, elimination, through a process of elimination and thinking to say, all right, the closest month to December would have been November. They could also do that in terms of weeks. How long is it, or how far from December is February 12th? how far from December is May 4th, that sort of thing. So it would cause our children to think. Anything going on in the chat, Mrs. Cummings?
Yes. And we have a response to whose birthday is closest to December, and that's
Okay.
mother, coming
Right.
from Althea Hamilton. Thank you,
Very.
Althea.
Thank you. So parents, another question. And remember too, we're doing all of these to reinforce as a means of reinforcing. So earlier on, Mrs. Cummings took you through the counting principle, looking at ordinal number. Here too, we can use birth dates to also bring in ordinal number. Here's this question. Who is the 5th person to celebrate their birthday each year? Based on so again, they'd have to look at the calendar, they'd have to look at the order in which they appear, and I'm seeing something in the chat, Mrs. Cummings.
Sure enough, we have a response coming up as mother, once again, from Althea Hamilton. All right, and I applaud the parents. And as we said, this activity is really helping our children to analyze.
Now, parents, we have looked at riding the shift, rote learning to conceptual mastery. Basically, what we have done is to just give you a few tips. We have not given you all the suggestions. It's just a few tips. And so we are just suggesting that the use of games and other household activities to assist in understanding basic math concepts. Another thing that can be done is that when assisting your child with math, ask, why did you? Or what can you do next? Do you see any patterns? How do you know? Another tip, have conversations on what is being learned in math and how it applies to everyday tasks. We trust that our few tips, we trust that the games that we suggested, the activities that we gave, and as I said, there are other things that you may find in the household. Some of the parents were kind enough to share other things. And I must again commend Tanis, who shared with the drink making activity. And there are other activities, parents, that you may find that we have not mentioned here this evening that can be used to assist with the birth dates, assist with critical thinking, assist with analyzing, assist with the number sequencing, the patterning, all the things that we mentioned here. And I must applaud you and thank you so much for participating and the rich level of communication that we had. I'll now turn over to Mrs. Cummings for the final words.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Simpson. Parents, thank you. I must say, Mrs. Simpson, our parents has talked with us this evening, and we really knew that we didn't want to keep you too long, but we really hope that these few activities that we have shared, that you will take them and you will just engage your children at home. Clearly, many of you have been doing a good job. So we just want to encourage you, tie in a little of that questioning that will allow your child to think a little deeper about what they're doing, utilizing the simple items that we have at home to just engage them in the counting, the grouping, the sequencing. Thank you, parents, for participating. Do enjoy the rest of your evening, and we look forward to you joining us in other activities in Region 5. Have a blessed evening.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, and the same to you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.